One is that the homeowner will never respond to the servicer. That's right. Many of these homeowners are so afraid or so jaded by their experience from the servicer, they will not respond. Now, I know that's their responsibility, it's their fault, but it's reality. They're not likely to open a letter from the servicer. Second, he's concerned that even if they do respond, that the servicer will not provide the kind of counseling that will result in a successful loan mod. And my comment on this, not Mark's, is that we're asking folks who have been going from the mindset that says, pay up or we'll take your house, to let's see how we can save your house. Call me a cynic. I don't see how they can do it. They're just not wired that way. Our housing counselors here in town are wired that way, and they know how to do it. And the third fear, and this is very real, is that the homeowners are going to be enticed by fraudulent operations that have the budget and the ability to market to vulnerable homeowners. It's just a sad statement on this society and this world we live in. If I had a nickel for everybody I've talked to or I've met in the past 3 years who was shelled out $1,000 or $1,500 of their hard-earned money to some foreclosure rescue scam who took the check and walked away, we could have a very expensive dinner tonight. And it's a very, very sad statement, but it's a reality. So I'm concerned that that could happen. The problem is, even though there's $700 billion of TARP money, and even though there's hundreds of billions of dollars of stimulus money, there's, best of our ability, best of our accounting, we see maybe $65 million in part of the bill for housing counselors nationally, and that is not enough. We need about $1 million to keep this effort alive here. We began the foreclosure prevention program in '06. We've raised a lot of money from foundations and banks, but that money has run out, and I hope that our federal legislators, who we convened in a conference call last week, pay attention to what we asked them. You know, we've asked them to really, and they've been very responsible. We had a call with Brown's folks, Voinovich, Kucinich's, and Marcia Fudge all on the line, and we said you have to try to find a way to carve out rescue counseling money for Cleveland, and I hope that they will. All right, through all these storm clouds, all of this gloom and doom, I'm happy to say that there is some good news, and there's some sunshine is starting to break through the clouds, and that's going to come in the form of the Cuyahoga County Land Reutilization Corporation, more commonly referred to as the County Land Bank. What is this thing, the County Land Bank? Well, it's a legal entity, a nonprofit corporation, a community improvement corporation formed under Section 1724 of the Ohio Revised Code that will act as a countywide regional repository for properties that are tax foreclosed or will come through a variety of other sources, including bank REOs. REOs, you'll hear that term, it's real estate owned. When a bank has taken property back, they don't like to take property back, even though they do it, they'd rather not do it. So we'll be getting, we think, properties through foreclosure and through bank REOs, and eventually we think from GSEs. Real quick, parenthetically, the bill passed December 18th. It was signed by the governor on January 6th, and the bill will become a law April 6th, and we expect to have this land bank up and running by the middle to the latter part of April. Perhaps the most important, or one of the most important functions of this authority is it will clear property titles that are transferred to the land bank, and anybody in the real estate business will tell you clearing title to a property that has a murky or worse, a toxic title is an incredibly valuable tool. The land bank will hold properties in the long and the short term. The land bank is going to be actively involved in improving and demolishing properties, but I will tell you early on the emphasis is going to be on demolition and clearance. The land bank will buy property, the land bank will sell property if necessary, and it'll be able to accept properties as gifts or donations. You'd be amazed at how many people have called attempting to make donations of property to the land bank. Now, most are distressed and are awaiting demolition, but they're trying to give us something, and we're encouraged by that. In fact, so far, they've all been stressed and are awaiting demolition. But I guess if you get one that's not distressed, let me know. I'd like to go see it. It's our hope that, actually, we had an interesting contact with one of the major hospitals that had received an offer of a gift, a piece of property that they could not use, had some value, and it might be the sort of place, the land bank might be the sort of place that could end up. It's our hope that the land bank will coordinate planning between the county and the communities in Northeast Ohio that are suffering with vacant property issues. And I believe that the land bank will help to stabilize regional property values by curbing the real estate market speculation that has made a bad situation in this community worse, in some cases, much worse. Before I get into specifics, let me explain to you how the land bank will be governed and funded. The 7-person board, the county treasurer, 2 county commissioners, 2 representatives of suburban government, and 2 representatives of city government. The land bank is going to be funded in 2 ways. By the way, there are a lot of land banks in Cuyahoga County. Most cities have land banks, but they're passive. They don't have the necessary resources to take in properties with structures, so they take only vacant land. Our land bank has to have money, or there's no reason to have a county land bank. We're going to fund it in one of two ways, and I'll explain how we're going to do this. My office collects about $1.5 billion a year in property taxes, $750 million in each half. Approximately 8 to 10% of those property taxes go delinquent. When that occurs, and many of you probably know this, especially my wonderful staff, who, by the way, is here, and I always have to thank them for doing such a great job that I get to run off and do all these unusual things. And they're all, would my staff stand, by the way? Just please stand real quick. By the way, we're lean and mean, but that's just some of them. There's actually more back at the 11. So 8 to 10% goes delinquent. When it occurs, a 5% penalty attaches for the first 10 days, and then the penalty increases to 10%. The new land bank legislation also attaches a 1% monthly penalty to those overdue payments. Under the new land bank legislation, we are empowered to borrow the unpaid property taxes at the end of the collection and advance those unpaid dollars to all the taxing subdivisions in Cuyahoga County based on their historic collection rates. Let me briefly tell you how this will work. Let's assume it's the end of collection. We have money in hand. We take a look at what the delinquencies are. We look at Beechwood. We know, for example, in Beechwood, we collect 99.5% of the property taxes in Beechwood. But in that collection, we've only collected 92. We would advance the other 7.5% with Beechwood and basically say, we're square. Now, if we collect the other 0.5%, they, of course, will get that, and they'll get it with penalty and interest. But we're going to do that all over Cuyahoga County. And in doing that, whether we borrow it internally or go to the market and use something called delinquent tax anticipation notes, we will then go out and collect the unpaid taxes, and we will take the benefit of the unpaid property tax delinquency and interest. And we know from our surveys, we've been back on a historic analysis that we're going to collect at least $8 million a year. That'll be the primary source of revenue. The other significant change in this law, and one that'll be our second source of revenue, has to do with how we will foreclose on tax delinquent property. Under the current system, when a property is foreclosed for non-payment of property taxes, it is adjudicated foreclosed by the judge and it goes to the county sheriff. If the property is a good property with value, there are buyers. If the property is less than desirable, there are no buyers. It does not sell, and eventually, complicated process, one way or another, it comes back to government. It is and always has been the privatization of profit and the socialization of loss. Under this new system, that property that is foreclosed will no longer be auctioned to the public. It will, after a 45-day period, the right of redemption, giving the property owner the chance to make good on that payment, that property will then directly transfer to the land bank, where in the cases of more desirable property, it'll be sold to the general public with the proceeds going to the land bank. Revenue the land bank will need to help service debt. And you might ask, what debt? Well, we hope that sometime in 2009, we're going to go to the bond market and borrow as much money as we possibly can, working with financial advisors. I'd like to think we can do a $60 million borrow to borrow the money we need to do what we need to do. And initially, as I said earlier, it's going to be demolition. Let's go over some basic premises. How much time do I have, Steve? 5 minutes. Okay. Let's go over some premises that I think drive this demolition argument. Number one, this community is shrinking. It is undeniable. The census numbers don't lie. Don't run from that fact. Embrace it. Don't make it your enemy. Make it your friend. That's my first point. Secondly, a community that housed 1.8 million people as of the 1980 census, just 20-some years ago, has too much housing, period. We have too much supply. Third, most of these people who have left are not coming back. Not anytime soon. I think we have to recognize that fact. They might someday, probably not in my lifetime. Fourth, most of these houses, these bombed-out shells, stripped of everything of value, are destroying property values for the people who remain in those communities. And fifth, if we don't get those houses down, it'll encourage further abandonment of these communities and further out-migration. Folks, we live in an age of problems that are so complex and so overwhelming, they seem to be without solutions. Job losses, urban education, the mayor talked about yesterday, the shredded fabric of the urban family, the list is endless. This is not one of those problems.